know, this is a portion of the account of Luke. So as you're kind of meshing the gospel accounts together, you're going to see Matthew gives the Sermon on the Mount basically from beginning to end, and the other gospel writers are not going to say, "Hey, this is the Sermon on the Mount," but they're going to tell you certain portions of that sermon are going to be included in their gospels that were just monumental and revolutionary events in the life of the disciples. So today um, we're going to read a lot of scripture, chapter 12, starting with verse 13 going through verse 34. We're going to talk about redefining wealth. And before we get into it, I want to give you one more warning, okay? This is, by the way of notes, this is one of the longest sermons that I've ever had. So I'm thinking that this might turn into 2 sermons. There might be a stopping point about halfway through, and you might get the rest of it next week. But depending on how time goes, I should have banked those 12 minutes last week, but I didn't. I ended up telling y'all a story and tying it into it. Anyway, gonna be a lot of info about redefining wealth. So, starting with verse 13, here we go. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." And Jesus replied, "Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter between you?" Then he said to them, "Watch out. Be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable: the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." And then he said, "This is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns and I'll build bigger ones, and I'll store up my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you have prepared for yourself. This is how it will be with whoever stores up for themselves, but is not rich towards God." We're going to stop right there. I want you to see what's happening here. As I told you, Jesus is in the middle of preaching the Sermon on the Mount, right? He is talking about all of these truths through Scripture. He's probably already said the Beatitudes that we see in Matthew chapter 5. Blessed are those who are poor. Blessed are the weak. Blessed are this, that. Blessed are all of these blessings that he's given to people who are seeking after Jesus. And then he's gone on throughout the sermon. And all of a sudden, as he's preaching, in the middle of his sermon, in fact, probably in the middle of one of his most popular sermons, this particular person decides to ask a question. Now, in modern culture, that is completely unusual. Right? Like, we don't just raise our hand in the middle of the service and ask questions while the preacher's preaching. But in this context, it would have not only been unusual, but it would have been offensive. So Jesus, imagine him speaking to thousands of people on the hillside, and all of a sudden somebody just shouts out, "But Jesus, tell my brother to give me part of the inheritance." Can you see what a distraction and what an odd situation that might be? And Jesus finds himself in it. And like a great speaker, I think about comedian. Now, Jesus wasn't a comedian, but like comedians deal with people talking back and forth to them, and good ones can banter back and forth in a good way and play it off really well, right? In perfect fashion, without missing a beat, Jesus not only responds, but he shifts the message of his sermon to deal with exactly what this person needs to hear, and in fact, all of the people around need to hear. So I want to kind of just throw that out there because, as I mentioned, some of you found your way here today, and it's one of those gloomy days outside. But I believe that if you're here today, you need to hear this message. And I want to say that because I almost changed this message because I want everybody to hear this message. Like, I want to preach this with a full house. So I almost said, you know what? It's going to be rainy. It's going to be nasty. We're going to have about 20 people, 25 people there if we're lucky. Let's save this one and put it in the bank. But then I said, you know, the people that are going to be here need to hear this message. And God has ordained you to be here to hear this message. So I need you to understand that. So interrupted, right? He's interrupted in the middle of his sermon. In my mind, it's obvious that this person who's interrupting Jesus has been hurt by the issue that he's going to bring up, and likely one or two things is happening here. Either something that Jesus said triggers the memory, and he sees this as an opportunity for Jesus to publicly side with him and settle the argument between him and his brother. So that's case number one. This guy shows up at the sermon. He's forgotten. Maybe it's not on the forefront of his mind that his brother has gypped him out of part of the inheritance. But Jesus says something. And when he says that, he's reminded that his brother gypped him. And he said, Jesus, this would be a great opportunity for him to show my brother how wrong he is. Let me call this out into public and let Jesus side with me. Either that happens in my mind, or this guy is so mad that his brother has gypped him out of the inheritance that he is sitting through the entire sermon on purpose just to have the opportunity to tattle on his brother to Jesus. One of the two things is playing out in my mind. Now, I'm just going to tell you, I could be completely wrong on that. But as I interpret scripture, like if I'm that guy, that's probably what's going on in my mind. Right? So he's either there and Jesus sparks this, opens this wound. Let's just say that, right? Or he's there to get his brother in trouble. Now, why would he think Jesus should settle this matter for him? Well, in that day, it was common for rabbi in an appropriate setting to make judgments like this. So they didn't have to go through like the court system, or they didn't have to fight it out long drawn out. They could go to the rabbi, and the rabbi could make a judgment, and people would have to follow that judgment, right? But this was not the time nor the place for such a judgment to be handed out. And Jesus was on mission in his ministry, so he's interrupted to do a task or to be asked a question. And the question is this: please tell my brother to split the inheritance with me, to give me my share. Now, if we're thinking about that practically, that's not too unusual, or that's not too bad of a request. Like if you were him and your brother has gypped you out of half of the inheritance, you would think that that would be a reasonable request, right? So it's not that the question is outlandish. It's not that it's inappropriate, but the timing and the message that Jesus is able to preach from it can and should change this person's life and also change the way we live and the way we view money. It should redefine wealth for us. Check out how Jesus responds. He says this, verse 16. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. Now, one thing I love about Jesus is that when he is offered a question, most of the time, he doesn't just simply answer the question. Wouldn't it be easier when we deal with God if he would just say yes or no? Like if we were to go to him and say, hey, I feel like I've been gypped out of part of the inheritance. Don't you think so? And he's like, no, please go about your business. I mean, sometimes I think that would be a little bit easier. But Jesus in scripture, when he responds to situations like this, he almost always responds with a story. And not only just a story, but a story that he's going to have to explain. I think Jesus was one of the most fabulous storytellers of all time. Right? So when this person comes to him, tell my brother to give me my share of the inheritance, Jesus says this: now the ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant crop. And I would imagine that guy who asked the question was like, yeah, I don't really care about the rich man's ground. And then Jesus continues. He thought to himself, the rich man, that is, the abundant crop, the farmer, he thought to himself, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops. Then he said, this is what I'll do. I'll tear down my barns, I'll build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry. Which, by the way, eat, drink, be merry, one of the most misinterpreted scriptures there, because it's followed by this. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then you will get what you have prepared for yourself. This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich towards God. Now, what in the world does that mean for us today? I want you to see what's happening in this story, in this parable that Jesus is telling. A farmer defies all odds, and he has so much success with his crop that he doesn't have enough room to store it. No one else is having the success around town that this farmer had. But in some way, some form, this farmer has so much success, so much crop, this particular, that he does not have enough place to store it. Now, I want you to know something. as you drive through these farming communities, so you've done this on the interstate, right, where there's like miles and miles worth of farmland. Those particular farmers all have enough space to store what it is that they're farming. Like farmers are prepared people. They're prepared for all kinds of situations. And now it wasn't that he was unprepared. It was that the harvest that he experienced was so tremendous. It was more than he and more than any of his neighbors. This was beyond best case scenario for him. But this caused a dilemma. What are we going to do with all of the extra? Should we store it up until we